Today was tiebreak day in the FIDE World Cup. I'm going to show you a game that starts quite quietly but builds up, and at the end there is a beautiful finish. So stick around. You're going to see something very nice. So this is a game between Tamir Nabaty, who's 28 years old, from Israel, been twice Israeli champion, rated currently 26.58. And his opponent, SP Sethuraman from India, one of the great cohort of young and talented Indian players. Not quite as young as Nihal Sarin, however. Now, in their first tiebreak game, Nabaty won. So Sethuraman had to win this game to level the scores, and then they go to quicker tiebreaks. So Sethuraman in a must-win situation. So Nabaty with the white pieces, and well, he only needs a draw, so he plays a pretty solid opening. Doesn't go for a main line King's Indian, but instead plays Knight D2. Well, when your opponent has already committed with D6, then Knight D2 is not a bad idea, because you go for E4, and now we've transposed into a kind of modern defence, and C3, and this, of course, this kind of system for white, it can be arrived at through lots of different openings. I mean, it's very much like a torre, where normally the bishop comes out to G5 first. You can also get this position through a closed, through a C3 Sicilian, actually. So it's a very common kind of system. And here white's idea is to exchange and then to control the light squares on the queen side. And this is a very respectable system. But it's been known that black also gets a decent game by playing queen c7. I remember Korchnoi annotating a game where he said that's where the queen belongs. It's important to control squares along this diagonal. So Sethuraman following the approved method. So, you know, white controls C4 square, but, you know, black is fighting back here as well. Here Sethuraman decided to put the bishop on B7. That is absolutely acceptable, a good idea. You can also put the bishop on E6, for example. H6 and then bishop H6 and bishop E6, but B6 is fine. So Nabaty playing very solidly, got his pieces to nice squares, and now plays bishop G5. There was also, in this kind of system, there was a famous game between Yusupov and Kasparov as well, where Kasparov outplayed Yusupov very nicely with the black pieces. But you have to be very patient with black in this kind of position, and quite precise if you're going to kind of stir up trouble and try and shake the balance of the position. So I think Nabaty has chosen a good opening in that respect. So Sethuraman needs to somehow create some imbalance, and he does that by hunting down this bishop. So he wants to exchange off knight for bishop, and you never know, at some stage perhaps he can use the two bishops. Sensible. But knight e3. Well, that's a good move. Looking to come into d5, and e6 isn't possible because of the pin here. But Sethuraman continues with his plan, g5. Good idea. The knight comes into d5. Now, remarkably, this position has actually been played before, and black played queen b8. White sacrificed, but it's probably a bit dubious. But anyway, queen came back to c8 in our game. And now Nabaty played the bishop back to g3 after, well, 4.5 minutes thought, which is a real chunk of time, considering that the players start with 25 minutes only. They also get 10 seconds added per move, but still, he must have been thinking very closely about bishop takes g5. And I'm sure that he wanted to make this move. It's actually very unclear. White has a very potent attack here. 2 pawns already. The knight is attacked. There's the potential to play e5 here. If, for example, knight f6, then e5 is actually winning straight away. So black has to play bishop h6. And then we get this exchange. And then simply rook d3. And this is a really potent initiative for white. But I guess he couldn't be absolutely sure. And you know, the computer shows that black can defend that position, but it's not easy. But he couldn't be sure and played pragmatically with bishop g3. But that does allow black to exchange off that knight's bishop and play e6 and push the knight back. So Sethuraman has survived the first little crisis in the position, and he's managed to grab that bishop. Now let's see what he can do next. Knight e7. So that opens up this diagonal. And now Nabaty exchanged rooks and offered another exchange. Remember, he just needs a draw. And then queen c6. Well, so far so good for Sethuraman. If in this position knight d2, well, of course it's quite acceptable for white, but there is a danger here that white is falling into passivity and that black might start simply to advance the queenside pawns and then, you know, at some later stage manage to open up this diagonal. So Nabaty played queen d3. Now that's a very interesting decision. He doesn't want to wait passively. Offers the e-pawn and wants to come down here. Now black could fall back with queen c7 and then knight c4 and, well, yeah, it's probably about equal. But remember, Sethuraman needs a win, and he accepted the challenge and took the pawn. And now things start to get very interesting. A check. So the knight needs defending, therefore bishop f8. And now bishop c2, attacking the queen. Well, a gentle follow-up, seemingly, but actually this pushes the queen away. And then it's the turn for the knight to come in. So that knight looking at f6, looking at h6. It's already quite dangerous. For example, well, here black very sensibly played king g7. But for example, if knight f5 defends this pawn, we could give a check. Push the knight out of the way. Knight here. Danger over? Nope. Bishop check. And queen g7 will be mate. So this is already quite tricky for black. So king g7 at least stops the checks. It's possible to take that pawn. Black would kind of solidify with f6, but I mean certainly that's still a very, very tricky position. But Nabaty gambled. He consumed 3 minutes over his choice here. Knight to f6, starting to get really tricky with that knight buzzing around the king. If king takes knight, then queen takes bishop, and suddenly that queen is in. Looks really, really nasty. One of those is going to be fatal. So knight f6 just played. Sethuraman brought the queen back sensibly, offering exchange of queens and sort of indirectly covering that bishop as well. So a check. Now king back to g8 doesn't help. We want to avoid the checks with king h8. But now it's dangerous. Sethuraman is pushing it in playing for a win because suddenly knight e5 and knight number 2 hits the attack. threatening knight f7. Well, here SP played f5. What happens on queen takes d8? Let's have a look. Of course, white regains the queen straight away. And in fact, this endgame is a little bit unpleasant for black. Here and then bishop e4. Black certainly is struggling to equalise that position. If you're playing for a win, not a lot of fun. Yeah, not easy to break free. Of course, a move like king g7, well, you can just check the king away and then come back. If you want to draw, you could play for more as well. And if bishop g7, knight f7 is rather unfortunate for black's king. So knight e5 just played, f5, understandably played to block out this bishop for the time being. Queen d6, the queen cuts back. Of course, f5 weakened this pawn, and white's piece is still buzzing around the king. Bishop here, c4. Bishop pushed away. It's very hard for black to break free here. And a check. And now that knight comes in to d8. This is great fun. Attacking that e-pawn. Difficult to defend against that. If the bishop comes to d7, then we've got knight f6 with a fork. So black is in trouble now. Big, big trouble. King g6 played. And now a nice bit of calculation. White breaks through. Knight takes e6. Threatening all kinds of very nasty things here. SP took the knight. And now a beautiful finish. Can you spot it? What does white play in this position? Knight g7. Check. That was taken. And now g4. Beautiful move. I think that move was very easy to overlook a couple of moves ago. If king takes pawn, then this is checkmate. And in the game, SP, well, what a gent. You all know that I like players that allow a checkmate, and that's what he did. Pawn takes pawn, and queen h2 checkmate. Isn't that beautiful, that bishop covering the g6 square, so the black king has no escape. Wonderful stuff. So with that victory, SP Sethuraman takes the plane home, and Tamir Nabaty goes through into the second round of this knockout tournament. But I have to say I really enjoyed that final attack. Remember, if you want to subscribe to the channel, then do click on that button below. If you want to support us, we'd be really grateful. Do check out the links in the video description. You can donate via PayPal or Patreon.com. Thanks for watching.